Hello guys, how's it going? Today I'm going to be talking about shipping, the different types of shipping, which one you should use, which one I use. So we've got air shipping, sea shipping, the different shipping terms such as FOB, DDP, DDU, EXW, so many different shipping terms, so many different shipping platforms. Which one's the best for you for your Amazon FBA business and just general shipping in my opinion. So we're going to get straight into that video right now. So I've already gone through and outlined some of the advantages and disadvantages of air freight and sea freight on the PowerPoint now. I'll just speak through them to explain them in more detail, but these are the main points in my opinion that you should consider when you're thinking about shipping. So the first one for the advantages of air freight is it's faster. It's so much faster. It can take up to 2 weeks, sometimes less than this. I've heard people say it's been delivered in a couple days, but something a lot of people don't take into account when shipping is it might take a couple days on the air freight and it might take 30 days on the boat. But you've got to consider the days it's going to take each end to load the plane or load the boat, unload it, then actually drive it to Amazon to scan it in. So with air freight, I'd say the whole process can take about 2 weeks, plus maybe a couple days to scan it all in. Secondly, we have not running out of stock. If you're just doing your launch or if any point in your Amazon business, you get a surge of sales. Maybe it's around December or any time of the year where you're running low and you think you're going to run out. Air freight can be a great option to top up before you run out so you don't have to go out of inventory. What I hear a lot of people do is doing split shipments. You don't have to do fully air or fully sea. Even for your first order, if you want to get selling, then you can maybe do 100 units by air and the rest of them by sea. So when your air units are about to run out based on your predictions for that product, your sea units will get there. So this can be a great way to cut the cost, not having the full cost of air freight, but not having the full time, just the time take up by sea freight. I would say that air freight is a pretty good choice for under 150 kilograms. This is still quite high and you would have to talk about your specific situation with a freight forwarder to determine whether this is still a good option price-wise. As moving on to the disadvantages, air freight is very expensive, much more expensive than sea freight, up to 3 to 4 times more expensive in fact, and this is definitely true if you look at the prices of each. This is mainly why I advise to only use air freight for smaller shipments, because in this case it can turn out that air freight is worth it and not as much more than sea freight as it would normally be. So if you are doing small amounts, or if, like I said before, you want to do a split shipment or you have to do an air shipment just to stay in stock, then it could be a good option. Obviously, in total, air freight is so much faster, a lot faster, but then to combine that, it's much more expensive. In my opinion, I'd rather just wait that extra little while and have bigger profit margins than get it there faster and not have as bigger margins. If you do what I always recommend, which is differentiate your product or bundle it, then you shouldn't have any real problems with getting it there a bit later. Because if you have changed the product and it's not the same as everyone else, then you should have nothing to worry about more people coming into the market if it's a great product, or other people just growing a bit more while you're waiting for your product to get there. That's my general opinion on air freight, but to get over with that, we'll move on to sea freight, which the first advantage over air freight, which is quite obvious to many, and I've just mentioned it, is sea freight being much cheaper. Obviously it is much cheaper and this is why it's the choice by many to use this, but obviously it comes with downsides. We'll get onto it in a minute. But the second advantage for sea freight is it's the best long-term strategy. And what I mean by this is once you get your product out on Amazon and it's selling and you've got a routine growing, then you'll start to know your product. You'll know when it's going to run out of stock, as you'll have the sales history to prove, and you'll just know by your numbers how long inventory is going to last you. So by that point, you can just regular shipments by sea freight, so that just as it's about to run out of stock, more comes in. And this will keep your profit margins high, rather than doing air freight every single time. So even if for your first shipment, you want to do air freight because of the time-wise to make it faster, even though it is more expensive. For a long-term strategy, I'd always recommend doing sea freight, as this will improve your profit margins. And once you know when your product's going to go out of stock and you can predict it, there's no real reason to do air freight, because the fastness of it isn't going to affect you if you know when your product's going to run out of stock and you can get the sea freight there just in time anyway. So obviously, although I've just said that sea freight is the best long-term strategy, at the beginning, a lot of people don't choose it purely because of its main disadvantage being that it's very, very slow. And in my opinion, this is the longest process in the FBA journey with Amazon, the shipping by sea. Me personally, I recommend doing sea shipping all the time just because it's cheaper, and a lot of people doing Amazon FBA don't have a large startup capital, or they don't want to invest more than they have to for their first product. So in this case, sea shipping is great, but you have to accept that it's very slow. And like I said before, you have to take into account the times on each side. So the shipping process, someone might say it's going to take 30 days. Okay, 30 days is fine. Even like 40 days, 45 days. That's kind of average. Then you've got to take into account the other time processes. So when you make your order, you've just paid your supplier. All's perfect. You're going to get your goods. Amazing. But you've got to remember, when you pay for your goods isn't when the boat leaves. The boat leaves when the boat wants to leave. So you may pay for your goods on a Friday and the boat doesn't leave until the following Friday, or until the next day, or 2 days time, or 3 days time. So taking a couple of days for that. Then the supplier's got to transport it to the port and unload it and do all of that. Whether your supplier does that or freight forwarder, we'll get onto that in a minute, but that could take a couple of days. Then you've got to ship it. That's a 30 to 45 days. So already we might have added a week onto that time. Then it gets to the UK. It might get held up in customs. That can be a week. It's got to get unloaded from the container and separated if you've done a partial container load, which I'm sure many of you will do for your first order, as you won't have enough units to do a full container load. So back onto that, you'll have to unload the container and separate your goods from any other goods in that container. That may take a couple of days. Then you've got to deliver it to Amazon. That's a couple more days again. Then Amazon's got to scan it in. This can take up to 2 weeks, but in my opinion, it's normally around, say, 3 to 4 days. So by that time, you may have added on another 2 weeks to that. So the whole sea shipment can take from a month and a half up to 2 months. And this is a very long time to stay motivated to that when your products get to Amazon, you're ready and you're still motivated to do Amazon, because that's a long time. Obviously you have your photography and your listing creations during that time, but it's a lot of time to try and take up by doing stuff, and you can't fill every day. So if you are worried about that, please check out my last video about how to stay motivated and how I stay motivated during this time. But let's just move on now to the shipping terms when you're shipping. So the key shipping terms I recommend knowing are FOB, DDP and DDU, which are quite similar, and EXW. So I always recommend that when you're first contacting your suppliers, you ask for the FOB price. And the reason for this is that with the FOB price, when the supplier quotes you, they will just give you the price for the product that you're ordering. With DDP and DDU, they won't do this. However, with EXW, they will. So let's just get into that a bit further now with the definitions and explaining them a bit. So FOB, this stands for freight on board, and means that the seller just pays for you will pay the supplier to make the goods and deliver them to the port. However, as soon as it gets to the port and changes hands from them to your freight forwarder, you take all responsibility for that shipment. So the insurance, the unloading and everything like that is then your responsibility. So as soon as it gets to the port, whichever port you've agreed, you take responsibility. Therefore, any costs after that point, any additional fees or anything that you incur will be yours to pay. So FOB is normally the shipping term that I use and I recommend, and this is the one I like to use the most. I'll get onto that in a minute. And the freight forwarder that I recommend the most, who is absolutely brilliant and I would recommend to anyone. So the next shipping term is DDP and DDU. They're abbreviations, kind of explain them. So you've got delivery duty paid and delivery duty unpaid. This means that the seller, i.e. your supplier, pretty much handles everything. You pay them one lump sum. So why I said to ask for the FOB price rather than the DDP or DDU is because if you ask for the DDP price, DDP even, they will give you the all-in cost of the goods plus the shipping, because they will be handling this. Therefore, you don't know the actual costs of the product separate from the shipping. So normally when you're first contacting, you want the FOB price just so you know the price of the unit and not the price of the unit plus shipping. It's better to ask for these separately when you're first contacting suppliers, in my opinion. So DDP and DDU. So the supplier is going to handle everything. You're going to pay them and they're going to get it to the UK or to Amazon, depending on what you've agreed. So they will take it on all the costs throughout the entire delivery. Any hidden fees or any customs problems, they will pay it all. They'll handle everything. They will, with DDP, they will pay the duties. The duties can be calculated by using the commodity code for the goods you're importing, which can be found on a .gov website. It's pretty easy to do, and it all goes on what type of materials your product's made of and just what you're importing along that kind of line. With DDU, delivery duty unpaid, as it said, they won't pay the duties, but they will pay all the other costs involved in delivering the goods to the final destination. In most cases, I don't recommend DDP or DDU. And the reason for this is I have heard a countless number of horror stories with this kind of shipping terms that I know some people recommend, but I personally don't. And the reason for this is because the whole shipping process is quite easy. However, I can only imagine that with a Chinese supplier, if their communication isn't great, if they're replying, they obviously don't reply instantly, they're in a different time zone, if you have problems at customs, all these things are not stuff I'd want to get into with a Chinese supplier, because it wouldn't be as easy to communicate as an English freight forwarder, someone you can talk to and get an immediate response, an in-depth response any time of the day, just like the freight forwarder I'll be talking about in a minute. So this is why I wouldn't recommend this shipping service or these shipping terms, along with the fact that they are handling the whole shipment and all the payments. So if they know that they're going to get a shipping charge for this and a loading charge for this and all these additional fees, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think your supplier is going to look at all these charges and think, do you know what, we're going to take on that charge and that charge and that charge, and we're going to do it all because we want to take all the charges? Or are they going to look at all of those bills and they're just going to put them all straight onto your bill and send that to you and say, right, you owe us this amount? Obviously, they're going to do the latter of the two. So you're going to be paying for charges you may not normally pay for. And this is why I just don't normally recommend it. I'd rather work with an English supplier who I know if there's any problems, I can call them straight up, I can message them, I can get an instant response, and I can know exactly what's going on. I've heard so many situations where people are getting worried because they don't know where their shipment is. They don't know what's happening. They've got messages from customs and they don't know what's going on. They can't contact their Chinese supplier. They don't have direct contact with the freight forwarder that the supplier is using. And it's such an easy process with shipping that there's no need to have these hassles in them. So this is why I don't really recommend this shipping term, although many people do use it. I personally don't. On to EXW. This is very similar to FOB terms. However, you just pay for the cost of production. The goods don't then get delivered to the port. Your freight forwarder has to pick them up from the warehouse and deliver them to the port and do the rest of the shipping process. So you are literally paying just for the goods rather than the cost of the goods and delivery to the port where it will be shipped to the UK. So that's the shipping terms that I see most often and see recommended the most, and what I most recommend being FOB. So I've talked about this a few times now, the freight forwarder that I use and the shipping process with the specific freight forwarder or just a good one that you trust is so easy. On to the one that I trust, being Westbound Logistics. I want to straight off just put this clear to all of you that if you've seen my earlier videos or if you're in my Facebook group and you've seen my live Q&As, which I do hold in my Facebook group for now, you will know that whenever I do an affiliate offer or post a link, I immediately state that that is an affiliate offer and I am an affiliate. I am not an affiliate for Westbound. They do not pay me a commission when I recommend them. They do not pay me anything when I recommend anyone to them or they use them. I recommend Westbound because they are the best shipper in my opinion for the following reasons I'm going to go through now. So as I said, I think they are the best freight forwarder from China to the UK. And a few reasons for this is the one that first drew me into Westbound is how approachable they were. They first contacted me, and from that moment on, if I asked a question, which went on for quite a while with me just asking questions and not even booking anything, they answer immediately, and their answers are not just yes, no, do this, do that. Every time I asked a question, I would get a paragraph, or they would offer a phone call. They were so helpful, and it was almost like I had hired someone to help me through this process. When you message them or try to contact them, you don't get a sales rep or someone on the phone trying to sell their service. Most of the time, you can talk directly to Ryan Clark or Danny Horn, who are actually the directors of Westbound. They're so approachable and they're so easy to talk to that I just couldn't imagine doing anyone else. I had used freight forwarders before this, who were recommended by other people, but until I actually talked to Westbound, I didn't know what good service was, and they really show me what good service could look like. So I strongly recommend, even if you've already found a freight forwarder and you're definitely using them, just email Westbound or try and talk to them or contact them through my Facebook group. However you want to contact them, please try it. If you're in my Facebook group, you'll know that whenever you ask a question, I can tag them and they'll answer immediately, and their answers will be on point every single time. If you're just watching this video and you want to contact them, I'll leave an email in the description. But yeah, they are just amazing in that front of replying quickly and in depth. So even if you do have a freight forwarder already, just contact them, ask them a question, ask them what they can do differently. Because until I did this, I didn't know how amazing a freight forwarder could be and how much cheaper a freight forwarder could be. So something that they have that a lot of freight forwarders don't have is an actual office in China. And they have Chinese workers, staff in China that they employ. I think they actually employ more staff in China than they do in the UK. So that when you order with them, they don't try and contact the supplier and talk to them. They get their office in China, from Westbound China, to contact your supplier and arrange your shipment. And I'm sure you can imagine how easy this makes things for your supplier to talk to someone in their native tongue, and just makes the process a lot easier and a lot smoother, so that you're not trying to communicate with your supplier in a different language. They can talk to someone from their own country who understands it all much better than anyone else, and it just makes everything easy. Another benefit to this that I found personally is that if you are having any other problems trying to get documents or anything you need and you can't communicate that to suppliers and you're worried that they're not understanding you, you can contact Westbound if you're using them, or even just as a favor maybe, and ask them to contact the supplier for you. Because they do have staff in China who can talk to them in Chinese, where they can understand and explain your exact situation so that you know that they understand what you mean. And I don't know any other companies that really offer this. If you find any smaller, just specialised FBA freight forwarders, they obviously don't have this. They're a small show and they just can't offer this kind of service. And that's a main reason why I find Westbound also a great choice over other people. Combined with the fact that when I first messaged him, as I said, I was about to go with another freight forwarder and I got offered a better price with Westbound than if I went with this other supplier, even though this guy I was going to go with was a specialised FBA shipper. So I thought obviously he's a bit smaller, he might have lower overheads, he'll be cheaper, but I was wrong. He was more expensive than Westbound, who they're an established business, but yet their prices are still cheaper than anyone else I've found, which is just mind-boggling to me how they can offer all of this great service and still have the best customer service that they have. I've mentioned before about smaller freight forwarders and things they can't offer, which mainly comes into this point 5, which is that Westbound have their very own services. And this is quite a key point, and it means that when you use a smaller freight forwarder, I know quite a few other people would recommend smaller freight forwarders, but something they can't offer is their own services, where they handle every part of the shipment process. They load it, they unload it, every part of the process, it's in Westbound's hands. Whereas with smaller contractors, they will subcontract to companies like Westbound to do parts of the shipping process because they can't do it themselves. This isn't the case with Westbound. When you order them to do your shipment, you order them to do your shipment and every part of it. They handle it, they unpack it, they do everything. Every step of the way, if you have a problem, then you can contact Westbound and they can sort it because they are handling it. They're not subcontracting to someone else. you can't contact them and they can't help you because someone else is handling that process, like is the fact with many other smaller freight forwarders. They do it all. So they therefore control the costs of every part of the shipment process. If they subcontracted, like other freight forwarders, then they would have to add their margin on top of what they're contracting it for. Because Westbound don't have to do this, it saves you money because they control every single part. They don't have to add on their markup onto each part, so they can offer you the best prices. As simple as that. As with all freight forwarding, there's no need to worry about anything. I know that when I started Amazon FBA, I was really worried, and a main worry for me that I know is quite silly now is I thought, how am I going to get the supplier to meet my freight forwarder? Am I going to have to arrange for them to meet? How am I going to know what time they're both going to be there? Establish for them where to meet, how to communicate with each other. I was really worried about this until I talked to Westbound and they explained the process so simply that you don't have to do anything. They handle every single step. And the way this starts is you say you want to use them, and it's basically it. You fill in a form, a few details, your name, company name, basically it. You tag them in an email with your supplier, a simple message saying, this is going to be my freight forwarder, Westbound Logistics. Can you please both get in contact and arrange it? And I am not kidding, that is literally it. That is all I did. The next thing I knew I would get, anytime I asked, I get an update from Westbound. It's been loaded, this has happened, we're at this stage. Constant updates. I knew where my shipment was at every part along the way, and they just handled everything. They get their Chinese office to talk to your supplier, and they do it all. You literally do nothing during the shipping process. Unfortunately, during my shipping process, my goods got held up at customs, something I was really worried about. It did happen, but it wasn't even a bump in the road. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to contact the HMRC once. Westbound did it all. They kept on to them. They speeded the process up as much as possible. They made it as cheap as possible for me. It was just so easy, and I literally had to do nothing. So this is why that Westbound are so helpful in answering questions. If you have a problem with customs or anything in the shipping process, even if you're not using them, their replies can be so helpful and save you a lot of time and money, which is just out of this world, and I'd recommend them so strongly that I would never use anybody else. So if you did like this video and you've learned something about shipping, about the shipping terms, about air freight versus sea freight, what my opinion is along the line, when's best to switch, when you can do split shipments and things like that, I'd really appreciate it if you liked and considered subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'm going to have much more content coming out, and I'll be going live in the future, so hit the bell button. Thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next one.